There we go. Roman Pichler, thank you for being over here. I know you're busy and I really appreciate the time. Thank you for being in the podcast. And if you can present yourself, share whatever you want to share with the audience about yourself, and maybe talk a little about what initially sparked your interest in product management and your journey, right, from a software developer to product manager expert.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. So what I do is I talk about and I write about product management, particularly for digital products and particularly for people who are interested in agile practices. How do I get into product management? How do I develop an interest in the subject, in the profession? Well, I started out as a software developer and then ended up working with a group of product managers at a healthcare company, trying to help them bring a new healthcare product to life. And that was a very interesting experience. And so I didn't know much about product management, but I learned a lot from working with the product people involved, particularly then with the lead product manager. Unfortunately, the product wasn't successful. But as I said, I learned a lot. So like many people, I kind of fell into product management, and it really then sparked an interest. And as much as I still as much as I'm still interested in technologies, I discovered that if we don't really make the right product related decisions, if we don't really understand who the users and customers are and why they would want to use or pay for our product in one way or another, what makes the product stand out and how the product can generate value for the business, what's the underlying business model, what are the underlying business goals, then selecting the right technologies, it's kind of, or worrying about the technologies and worrying about the perfect architecture is kind of pointless. So yeah, that's how my journey started.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I agree. Product management, I think it's key in the design and also development of products. If you don't have the right product for the right persons, it doesn't matter what technology you use, right? Roman, could you walk us through, you have written some books and collaborated with other authors in some of them. Could you walk us through the books that you have participated? We will put the links over there in the description so they can get one, but could you tell us?
Yeah, sure. So the first book that I wrote was actually a book about Scrum. But then maybe a book that's more related to product management is, called Agile Product Management with Scrum. And that came out quite a while back. So my interest really was in describing practices that would help product people, would help product owners in a Scrum context make the right decisions. So, I cover the product owner role, I cover the interaction with some of the other roles, I cover the product backlog, I cover, prioritization techniques, I cover some of the sprint events and how product people, how Scrum product owners might want to participate in those events. And so that's in a way more, you could say, development or delivery focused. And then my next book is about product strategy and product road mapping practices. Hence, it's called Strategize. Mm-hmm. And as I said, it focuses on the strategic practices. And, it became obvious to me, partly while I was working on Agile product management with Scrum, that, as important as it is that we make the right tactical delivery-oriented decisions, and we get the user experience right, and we get the functionality right, and we prioritize the features of the product in the right way. If the strategic decisions are lacking, or if they're wrong, then all the tactical delivery-oriented work isn't that valuable. And so, I wrote a book that I would have liked to read, and in a way, that's true for all of my books. I think I wrote books that, as I said, I wish had existed and, would have helped me in my journey, in my development. And then the latest book is called How to Lead in Product Management. And that offers practices, leadership practices for product people, things like goal setting, things like dealing with difficult stakeholders and managing conflicts and friction, or making decisions together and securing strong buy-in to those decisions. So yeah, those are the three books that at least when it comes to product management that I've written.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Roman, one question that we get a lot is the difference between product managers, the role, and also product owners and business analysts. How could we define those?
Yeah, and that's it's an interesting question. And I've got a similar experience as you. I get that question asked fairly frequently. So traditionally, a product manager is responsible for a product, and I would argue that a traditional product manager makes the relevant decisions for the product, and in a way manages, owns the product, and then is responsible for the success of the product. In traditional product managers, I mean, at least how I experienced product management in the 90s and the early 2000s, can be quite sequential. So traditionally, you'd use a waterfall-based sequential innovation process where initially maybe some form of research or discovery is done, and then some business analysis is done, and then you get a strategy and a business model, you create a product roadmap, and then you write the requirement specification, and a traditional product manager would then hand off this requirement specification to a project manager and one or more development teams. And then at some point in time, hooray, a software product would appear, assuming it's a digital product. And then, the product manager would come back to prepare the launch of that product or the introduction of a new version. And of course, things are very different in an agile, certainly in a Scrum-based context, where I think a key idea in an agile context is really to encourage collaboration and encourage continuous collaboration rather than having specialists who work in a largely isolated manner. However, if you look at how the product owner role is defined in Scrum, then I feel that the responsibility is very similar to a traditional product manager. So, the Scrum product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product. And if that's true, then the role has to understand what value means. What does it mean to create value for the users and the customers in the business, and then has to be able to, make the right decisions in order to ensure that the desired value is indeed created. So, the responsibility is very similar. What then the term product owner in my mind strongly suggests is ownership, is a strong level of empowerment. Somebody who works with a group of other people, a cross-functional development team, possibly several cross-functional self-managing development teams and stakeholders, knows that it's desirable, it's nice to reach agreement, but it's not always possible. And so I've always felt that the empowerment of the product owner has to mean that if no agreement can be reached, if no consensus can be reached within a reasonable time frame, then the individual has the authority to make a decision. And so ultimately the individual owns the product on behalf of the company, and hence the name. And if that is true, then a product owner in an agile Scrum-based context is not only responsible for managing the product backlog and writing user stories, but really to make also the strategic decisions and owning the strategic aspects of a product, you could say, and therefore having, another way maybe to put it is holistic or full stack ownership, owning a product and the related decisions top to bottom. So that's at least my view of a product owner in Scrum. And I've always thought of a Scrum product owner as an agile product manager. And you could ask, why did Scrum coin the term product owner? Why didn't Scrum use the term product manager? Well, I think that the few reasons. One is really to emphasize that strong level of empowerment. The second one is that when Scrum became popular in the early 2000s, product management looked very different from what it is today. As I tried to explain, it was pretty old school. So traditional product managers, really would not work in the way you want a modern or, agile product manager to act. So, there's a significant change. As I said, we value collaboration in an agile space. I would expect that somebody who works as a product person in an agile context, has regular or frequent interactions with development teams, with stakeholders, with users and customers. And then, another reason would be that when Scrum is not only used in product companies where product management exists, but also used in, say, has been successfully used in companies like, say, banks or insurance companies. And these organizations traditionally don't have a product management, at least not a product management for software products, for digital product. And so if you then require basically a product manager to be there or a product management function to exist, you create quite a barrier for the introduction of agile practices. So yeah, that's sort of how I would characterize the difference. And then finally, the business analyst. That's an interesting one too. Now, I personally, I've experienced the business analyst role being applied in very different ways, from somebody who would essentially detail requirements and maybe also help with some system architecture, high-level architecture decisions to somebody who would act in similar ways to a product manager or Scrum product owner. Now, in an Agile Scrum-based context, there is no business analyst. And so, for people who work as business analysts, then they have a choice. One choice is to become a product owner, which sometimes means that they have to acquire additional skills and, they gain responsibility. They also hopefully gain authority, or to work as a team member. But the role is likely to change and it's likely to broaden, because if I work as a team member, then I'm not only responsible for helping shape the product backlog and the product backlog items, but I might then also help writing some of the documentation, for instance, or help with creating some of the tests. So yeah, that's the way I describe it.
Yeah, thank you. I like the simplicity of the differentiation of each role, right? Okay, so Roman, for those product managers or product owners, or even for Scrum Masters that are looking at this video, what would be your top 3 tips on how to be a better product person, right? Let's focus on the product owner, right? How a product owner doing Scrum can be better for the team.
Yeah, that's another interesting question. Generally I find, I may be biased here, but I generally find that product people in an Agile context, product owners often are a little bit too focused on the tactics, a little bit too delivery oriented. Mm-hmm. And so I think many product owners can benefit from acquiring knowledge around strategic decision makings and strategic artifacts. So understanding what is a product strategy and how can it help me, what kind of decisions are being typically captured in a product strategy, or what's a product roadmap and how can I use a product roadmap, how does it help me make effective product backlog decisions. And maybe also, around the business model, what's the business model that's underlying my product that helps generate the desired value. And that's particularly helpful for commercial revenue generating product. But I think generally an understanding of business goals and business model is desirable for product people. So that's one area. Another area would be to not neglect the people skills and bringing awareness to how you interact as the person in charge of the product or as a product owner with development team members, with coaches, scrum masters, but also with stakeholders and users and customers. And, for me, it's a balancing act between providing product related guidance and product related leadership, but also being collaborative and being open-minded, being willing to listen to the ideas and perspectives of other people, even if you don't necessarily approve, or even if you maybe don't necessarily like the individuals or find them particularly likable. So yeah, sort of really adopting a collaborative mindset. And the third one would be to reflect on how you manage your time and where you spend your time. A lot of product people, I find, can be overworked at times, at least. And obviously, if we're continuously overworked, it's unhealthy. It damages our mental health. It can lead to physical health issues. Our creativity suffers. We make more mistakes. At least that's the likelihood. And so part of it is saying no. Part of it is really focusing on what product people and product owners should do and ultimately get paid for. So, a common issue I see is that product owners don't have a Scrum Master or Agile coach as a partner available, or so that there's either no Scrum Master Agile coach, or the Scrum Master Agile coach is not sufficiently available or not sufficiently qualified. And then product people try and help out, which is kind of natural, and try and fill that role, at least to a certain extent, which makes an already challenging and diverse role even more challenging and diverse. And so, that might make sense as an intermediate temporary solution, but as a long-term solution, I think, again, it's just not desirable. It's unhealthy. So, then recognizing there's an organizational impediment, there's a real systemic issue here that needs to be addressed. That role needs to be filled if you want to be agile, if you want to successfully apply agile practices and work with the decision makers in the organizations to bring about that change, rather than just kind of putting up with it and, as I said, filling the gap. And another one is, I mentioned that earlier, that's tied to the first recommendation, spending enough time on strategic product aspects and product discovery. If you cut corners in those areas, then you'll experience more unplanned work in the future. And so, one way to do this is really to time box and ring fence a few hours per week, at least half a day. That's sort of the rule of thumb that I like to give product people. Ring fence half a day in the calendar, and use that time in order to talk to users and customers, selected users and customers, look at analytics data, do a little bit general market and competitor research to see what's happening in that space, look at any new technologies that might have occurred. So, look at the big picture, so you don't kind of make the mistake that you're stuck in the details and you're stuck in delivery, and you don't really see any changes, any bigger changes that are happening, and you kind of executing perfectly the wrong approach, the wrong strategy. That'd be a shame. So yeah. So those, I think, are my 3 recommendations.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Roman. Now, could you share with the audience some anti-patterns that you have seen in the companies where you have collaborated? I'm looking for not like the regular ones, like they don't know how to prioritize. I don't know. I'm looking for those that are a little hidden, right? Like product owners could be looking at this video and saying, I'm a great product owner. Maybe they are not, because what are the hidden anti-patterns that you can find?
Yeah, what are some key anti-patterns, some key issues? I mean, for me, a key issue is that no product strategy exists. So I think it's really, really difficult to make the right decisions, particularly the right detailed, tactical, delivery-oriented decisions, prioritize the product backlog, if you don't understand who the product is for, who are the users and customers, and who should benefit from the product, but equally, who shouldn't. And then, what's the value proposition? What's the need that the product should address? What's the main problem that it should help solve, or the primary benefit it should generate? Why would people want to use the product? Why would people want to pay for it? And then certainly for commercial products, what makes that product stand out? What makes it different? What gives it maybe an advantage over competing offerings? What encourages users and customers to prefer it over alternatives? And then finally, what are its business goals? What's the value the product should create for the company developing and providing it? So for me, these questions, I think you have to be able to answer them confidently, and you've got to have sufficient empirical evidence to show that your answers are likely to be right before you can make any other more detailed decisions, before you can identify any other maybe more specific goals. So, and I find that it's not uncommon that a product strategy, as I described it, doesn't exist, or that it's too high level, that it's too big and too coarse-grained, that it's too unspecific, that the product is for who should benefit from the product? Well, everyone. Which is like, yeah, that's nice. It's going to take a long time to build a product that's truly going to benefit the whole wide world. So yeah, a focused and a validated, as I said, a validated strategy, in the sense that there's data, there's empirical evidence that backs up the decisions that are being captured. And then another issue I see, that there isn't something like a effective or maybe modern, you could say, product roadmap available. And for me, again, that's a key product management tool. And an effective product roadmap for me is goal-based or outcome-based. So I like to work with outcome-based, goal-oriented roadmaps. I use those terms interchangeably. And I like to derive a roadmap from the product strategy, or make sure that any product roadmap is closely aligned with the product strategy. Focus first and foremost on outcomes, on specific outcomes. For instance, in the next 2 to 3 months, you might have an acquisition-related goal, or you might want to generate revenue, you might want to reduce cost, or you want to increase engagement, or you want to focus on removing technical debt in order to future-proof the product. Those are the type of goals that I would expect in a product roadmap. And then you can use the next goal and copy it into your product backlog, and use that to focus your product backlog, which is really nice. And not only are you then in line with the latest version of Scrum, the Scrum Guide, but also you get that focus, and you get a goal-oriented product backlog. If you're then being disciplined about this, that means you only have items in the product backlog that help you meet this goal, and consequently, your product backlog will be comparatively short and concise. And that tends to be beneficial, particularly as long as there's a certain amount of change. certainly for new products, for young products, and for changing products. So a goal-oriented approach in making sure that there is something like a product strategy, something like a product roadmap, that those plans, those artifacts are tied together and are connected to the product roadmap. For me, that is super important and super helpful. And again, it's something that I find, often doesn't exist. And if it exists, again, the plans often aren't detailed enough, they aren't specific enough, or they're isolated, they're fragmented, that connection quite there. And then the second anti-pattern, is kind of related to what I mentioned earlier, that the product owner role, but it's not only true for a product owner role, it's also true for maybe a more traditional product manager role, that product roles and product management in general is not properly understood and doesn't have the support, the management, the senior executive management support that I feel product people and product management as a function really requires and deserves. And so then product people, product owners often are seen as product backlog managers, as user story writers, and aren't really empowered to make any strategic decisions, but strategic decisions are being determined by, I don't know, powerful stakeholders or whoever shouts the loudest or the big boss. And I don't think that's an effective way to progress a product. I don't think that creates a healthy and motivating work environment. And ultimately those powerful stakeholders or the big boss will become a bottleneck. And so it doesn't scale really. It doesn't really support the growth of the company. So yeah, those are two things that I often see, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I totally agree with what you mentioned. And maybe every single company where I have been, where I see at roadmaps, they are output oriented, right? They put the features over there. But if we had outcome and goal oriented, it would be a different story, right? So I totally see that happening in many places, in most places, right? And what you mentioned first about the product manager or product owner knowing about the business, I have been there. I was in a company like 5 years ago. I was hired as a product manager, and I didn't know exactly how to answer the problem that we were solving, right? So I think I have to accept that I was not the best one at the role, because by the time that I figured out how to do the role, it was like time to go, right? It was like very late in the game. So the question would be, for those leaders hiring product managers, or for those product managers and product owners just joining a company right now, what would you consider that should be in their onboarding training, right? So they are prepared for the role.
Yeah, that's another great question, and thank you for sharing your experience. But you're not alone. I mean, one of the issues I do think we have in product management is that it's a comparatively young profession. Certainly in the digital space, I think the first product managers, or some of the first product managers, were employed at Microsoft in the 1980s. That's not that long ago, about 50 years ago. And then in the last 10, 15 years, product management, I believe, has changed significantly. We've talked about Agile, and Agile practices certainly have influenced and changed product management, but so has a lean startup and customer development or user-centered design. Just to name business modeling, it's another influence that comes to mind, and those are just a few of the influences. And so again, the profession has changed significantly. What's kind of missing is an element of standardization. For instance, around product roadmaps. I mean, you hear different definitions in the industry, and you hear different product management experts saying this is what a product roadmap is, or similarly, this is what a product strategy is. But we don't seem to have a clear shared understanding. That's the key information that must be in a product strategy. That's the key information that must be in a product roadmap. And some people say don't use a product roadmap at all. Product roadmaps don't work anymore because they think of feature-based, output-based roadmaps as you described them. And so there's an element of confusion, and that can make it hard to establish an effective product management organization. It can make it hard to hire the right people. Now, I believe that it's super important, and in a way that's a trivial statement, I'll still say it, super important to be clear on what is the job that I want to hire somebody for, and therefore have clear role definitions in place. I'm saying this, well, it should be trivial. It isn't always, because again, related to one of the anti-patterns I tried to describe earlier, the role definitions aren't always available, or sometimes roles it's just simply misunderstood and in my mind wrongly defined. So the first thing is really be clear on the role somebody should do and make sure that's properly defined. and then think about this desirable skills that somebody should have, and then try and find the right person that fits that role or can develop into that role. Generally, I would suggest that product people should be T-shaped, and I'm certainly not the first person to suggest that. My colleague Ellen Gottsteiner mentioned that quite a while back. So, T-shaped in the sense that successful product managers and product owners need deep expertise in their market, in their vertical, in their product category. So they need to know about the product, they need to know about the competition, they need about the specific user needs, about the specific market dynamics. And that can be quite different if you compare, for instance, I don't know, entertainment type or gaming products with healthcare products, right? So it takes a while to understand the healthcare market with specific regulations, for instance, like in the FDA and something, compared to what works and what doesn't work in the gaming space. But then when you look at the transferable product management skills, they can be broken, I find, into 3 areas. They're the tactical, delivery-oriented skills, the strategic skills, and the interpersonal people leadership skills. I like to call them leadership skills. And so, depending on what the role is about, you want somebody who's maybe stronger on the tactical delivery-oriented side, or maybe somebody who's more stronger on the strategic side, or somebody who's really good leadership skills, because you're hiring a senior product person and you expect that they've already got sufficient experience, and they have relevant strategy related and delivery related knowledge. Really, now you want them to lead a group of product people and interact with senior stakeholders successfully. So those are the 3 skill sets that I've identified, and I recommend to product people to use those 3 skill sets to reflect on their own skills, to do a little bit of skills analysis and say, where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses, and what are the skills that I want to develop, what are the skills that I want to deepen, what are the skills that I want to acquire. Don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing, Roman. I have read some of I still need to read the Strategize book, but I have read some of your work in blogs and in articles, and I see that you have developed, it brought my attention 2 things, right? A product strategy model and also a product vision board. Could you describe some of these work that you have done?
Yeah, sure. So the product vision board now is quite old. I think it's over 10 years old, 11 years old or something. So, and I briefly mentioned that earlier. When I was working on my book, Agile Product Management with Scrum, it occurred to me that it's all good and well to make the right delivery-oriented tactical product decisions, but what about the big picture? What about the product strategy? What about vision and strategy? Yeah. And so I was looking for a way to capture the product vision and the product strategy in a very simple way. And I've always been a big fan and influenced by some of the work of Kent Beck and the idea to do the simplest possible thing that works, the simplest possible thing. One of the ideas behind extreme programming, I believe, and so that's what I tried to do for the product strategy and the product vision, and that gave rise to the product vision board. And it was influenced by the work of Alexander Osterwalder. So the idea of visualizing information, kind of making it easily accessible, but also creating a structure, creating a tool that encourages collaboration. And the original idea with the product vision board was to have it like a canvas that people can draw up on the office wall, or on flip charts and put them on the office wall, or print out and then put it on the office wall and stand in front of it and collaborate. That was back in the day before we had Miro and Mural and Trello and all the other online collaboration tools that we have today. So that's how that came about. And the product vision board, as the name suggests, captures the vision. So for me, the vision is the ultimate purpose for creating the product, the positive change you want to bring about. And then it describes underneath it the product strategy with the 4 key elements that I've already mentioned: the target group, the needs, the product with its standout features, the business goal. And so I think it's really, really valuable. It's really can be very powerful to have a product strategy in place and have a product vision in place. But if that product strategy and vision isn't then connected to other planning artifacts in a meaningful way, you've got an issue. There's potentially a gap between the chasm and delivery. So a strategy delivery gap or chasm, and that's not desirable. And that's where my product strategy model comes in. And I developed the first version of it when I was writing the book Strategize, but in the preface, I think, of the first edition of Strategize, has an initial version of it, but it's very coarse-grained, it's very high level. And I think most people weren't really aware that, this is a framework or a model in its own right. The reason that I tried to keep it very lightweight is I didn't want to kind of force people down a specific approach or be prescriptive in any way. The idea was more to offer a set of practices that fit together and work together, but leave it up to people how they use it. And then, working with more companies in the following years, I discovered that a lot of people just need a little bit more guidance. Just telling people, here's a bunch of great practices, figure out how you want to use them. I know how I would use them, but you go and figure it out yourselves. For some people, that's frustrating and not really helpful. So I thought, okay, as I was in the process of updating the book anyway, I'll try and really formalize that model, and I'll try and beef it up a little bit more, add some more information to it without making it overpowering. And as I said, too prescriptive. And so the model itself is kind of really simple. It says it's a good idea to have a vision. That's this big, inspirational, overarching goal that describes the ultimate purpose for providing a product, and that should cover the next 5 to 10 years. And then based on the vision, describe a product strategy. A product strategy is more focused. It also contains 2 goals. The value proposition, the needs, you can think of them as user customer goals, and then it contains business goals. And so once you've captured your strategy, and once you've validated your strategy, once you've tested out that it doesn't contain any crucial assumptions, or you've addressed the key risks that might be hidden in some of its statements, you can then derive a product roadmap from it. And the connection is using the needs, user customer goals, using the business goals, and then breaking them into more specific bi-monthly or quarterly goals and capturing those goals, those outcomes on a product roadmap. And then taking the next quarterly or bi-monthly outcome or goal and copying it into your product backlog. And so that's sort of a central idea of the model, the framework that I've created. And what it gives you essentially a consistent way to come from a vision, or to connect product backlog details, product backlog items, user stories to your vision, and connect your sprint goals to your vision. And for me, that was quite a big deal. It took me many years to understand how that could be done. So when I first started with Scrum, I thought it's great to have something like a vision. Particularly the early Scrum books tend to talk a bit about the product vision and a vision. And this is great. And then all we get is the sprint backlog. And it's like, wow, okay, I've got this huge high-level vision, and then I've got these really detailed short-term tactical goal. And there's a massive gap. How do I fill that gap? Yeah. And of course, that's just one way to play things, but I find it works really well. And I know of a number of companies who've successfully applied the framework, and it's something maybe that for some of the people who watch this video, it's useful to explore and look in.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I have seen a similar approach working for some companies. Like, the way that I've seen it is setting up, like you mentioned, a vision, a roadmap, and then they used to put over there OKRs at different levels, right? At the higher level, C-level, and then OKRs for the teams. And then what I also saw that it's related to what you explained is every Scrum team was motivated to link every sprint goal to an OKR or to a part of the roadmap, of the goal of the roadmap. So I think that that's key, right? To ensure that the day-to-day from the teams is motivating or is collaborating towards a bigger goal or a bigger strategy, right? So I think it's very important, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned OKRs, and I don't necessarily want to elaborate on OKRs, and I'm certainly not an OKR expert, but I don't know. I always have a bit of mixed feelings when it comes to using OKRs in product management, and I'm generally speaking not a huge fan of applying them in a product management space. But I think it's very interesting to see that OKRs have in recent years received a lot of attention again. I mean, they're quite an old approach or technology, you could say. I don't know if that technology, strictly speaking, method is probably the better way. They were created, I believe, in the early mid 1970s at Intel by Andy Grove, at a time when Intel was growing. and the Intel management was looking for a way to coordinate all these different teams and making sure that everybody pulls in the same direction. And that's pretty much how I experienced them when I worked for Intel in the 1990s. But I think the need for OKRs, or the interest in OKRs, comes from the recognition that we need goals, and we need goals that are connected in a meaningful way, so that people move to get forward together. We create true value, and we don't have all these isolated teams that do their own thing, and then we hope and pray that somehow something bigger, meaningful will suddenly emerge. But so for me, one thing is to work with goals and outcome-based goals, and I'm a huge fan of that, and I believe that can be extremely valuable. Again, to coordinate different teams to progress a product, but also to coordinate different products and do some meaningful portfolio management. So that's one thing, I think. And then the other thing is the specific goal setting technique that you use. And so, sometimes OKRs may make sense, and sometimes they probably don't. So I wouldn't get personally too hung up about the goal setting technique. I'd personally focus more on making sure that you have the right goals, and that the right goals are described in such a way that it's helpful for everyone involved.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for sharing. Now that you mentioned what you're kind of not so fan, or you are, what do you think about, I don't want to forget about this question, right? So what do you think about SAFe? Do you like SAFe or not? Are you familiar with SAFe?
It's hard for me to say. So, similar thing as with OKRs. I mean, OKRs I've experienced myself, at least at one company. With SAFe, I mean, I've worked with companies that have applied SAFe, but I feel I've only kind of experienced certain aspects of SAFe. So I've never kind of gone through a whole SAFe implementation. And so I'm not in a position to say, here is one company, or here a number of companies, this is what they did, then they introduced SAFe, and then, that was their experience, that was the impact that the SAFe transformation achieved. I guess the good things, and they're probably not quite so beneficial things in SAFe. One of the issues when it comes to the product management aspects and the product roles I have is that SAFe splits the product responsibility by default, so into a tactical and into a strategic role. And the tactical role is called product owner, and the strategic role is product manager. Personally, I find that unfortunate. So, one of the things I find unfortunate is the naming, because it's created even more confusion about what does it mean to be a product owner. A Scrum product owner is not just somebody who's focused on the product backlog or a team backlog, as in SAFe, at least according to my understanding, but somebody who has full stack ownership, holistic ownership of a product. So there's confusion. And then having a tactical and having a strategic role is one way to scale, but there are other ways to scale. So we can give people authority over parts of the product areas, or I like to talk about features, but it doesn't really matter which term we use. And that's then more the less approach. So, both approaches can work. They have their benefits and they have their drawbacks. I just find it unfortunate that SAFe, being an agile framework, has opted for basically making that strategic tactical split the default, because in my experience that tends to work particularly well when you have a stable product and there aren't too many changes in terms of user experience and functionality. There aren't too many changes in terms of technology. But traditional agile practices obviously are designed for coping with a lot of change, coping with a lot of innovation, coping with a lot of uncertainty. So yeah, that's sort of one of the issues that I have with SAFe. But it's like SAFe, like the Scrum framework and in other approaches, including the models and frameworks that I've created. I mean, they're all just tools, right? I think what really matters is to understand what do we want to achieve, by using this tool, by introducing SAFe, or by introducing Scrum, or by using Kanban, or whatever it might be. What should it allow us to do, and what do we need in order to successfully apply this new approach?
Thank you for sharing. Okay, one of the big challenges that I have seen in some companies is when there's a product owner doing Scrum, but this person is not empowered by the C-level or by their managers to take real decisions, right? He's just taking notes on what someone up is deciding to build. what advice could you tell them, to these product owners? What can they do?
Yeah. So yeah, sadly, my experience matches yours. It's not uncommon for me to see that product owners are product backlog managers and user story writers. So the first thing is really to recognize that shouldn't be your job if you are a product owner, or similarly, if you're a product manager and you're largely asked to write requirements, write user stories, and prioritize them. That shouldn't be your primary job. Number one, certainly not the only thing you do. And then number two, try and bring about change. And the two ways you can bring about change, by trying to influence the decision makers, trying to understand why was the role set up this way, and why do they think that somebody who works as a product owner, as a product manager, whatever that role might be called, should be largely focused on tactical decisions, product decisions, and delivery work. Why is that? Maybe sometimes people have had bad experiences with product managers making the wrong decisions, or not taking any decisions, and then products being delayed, or products not being successful, not experiencing the success that they should have experienced. And so trying to encourage change that way. And then a second way to bring about change is to say, well, if there's no way that I can change my situation, but I really would like to take more responsibility and have full stack ownership of my product, consider applying for a different role.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things, if you're stuck in a role and you think it's not great, but all we do is moan, it mimight make us feel better, for a short while, but obviously it doesn't change anything, right?
Yeah, it's better to do something about it, right? I totally agree.
Yeah. And then sorry for interrupting you. Maybe there's another thing I should add, because it's sort of a story comes to mind, or an experience I had a little while back. I was talking to a product owner, in this case a lady product owner, and she was saying to me, "Oh, it'd be so nice if she could own her product roadmap, the product roadmap for her product." And I said to her, why wouldn't that be possible? Why isn't that possible? And she said, "Oh, my management just doesn't trust me. They don't kind of give me the authority." And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." And so we talked a little bit more, and after a little while, I said, "Oh, let me just ask you, have you created a product roadmap in the past?" And she said, "Oh, no." And I said, "Well, do you feel confident creating a product roadmap? Do you know how to create an effective product roadmap?" And she said, "Well, I'm not sure really, probably not." And so, I said to her, "Well, then one way to bring about change might be to try and acquire the relevant knowledge and experiment with different product road mapping formats, and maybe create a product roadmap and demonstrate that way that you are capable, and that in a way you are interested and you're eager, rather than expecting management to come to you and say like, 'Oh, we trust you now. We really want you now to do this.' So that's another way to bring about change, that you think about your own knowledge, you think about your own skills, and you're being proactive, and you try and expand them or deepen them, so that management can trust you. I mean, competence really is the basis for any trust. I mean, it's very, very difficult to trust somebody, to have faith in somebody, if we don't believe the person is sufficiently competent, right? So take the example of a mountain guide. If you want to walk up a mountain and you've hired a mountain guide, and then you say to the person, you get talking to the person before you set off, and you say like, "Oh, sorry, you must have been in your job for a long time." And the person is like, "No, actually, no, not that long, just started." And you say like, "Oh yeah, but surely you've walked up this mountain many times, or climbed this mountain many times." And the guide says, "Well, no, this is my first time." I mean, then I'd say like, "Oh, thank you very much, but I think I've got something else really, really important and urgent to do now.
Goodbye.
Maybe another time. Bye." So, of course, that's a little bit extreme, but, it's a similar thing. If I'm running a business or a business unit, then I'd like to be able to trust people to do a good job. And in order to be able to trust them, they need to have the relevant knowledge and skills. They need to have the relevant competence. And of course, it'd be nice if management would encourage people to build that up and offer appropriate learning and development measures. No question about that. However, there's so much information available these days about, say, product road mapping practices or strategizing practices, that it's quite easy to read up a little bit and build up confidence that way. I watch videos, including this one, I listen to podcasts, read books. So that can also be a good way to bring about change.
Yeah, totally agree. Start doing it, and then you will gain the trust, right? And then probably they will just trust it to you, right? So yeah. Roman, I have seen that another challenge for many product owners doing Scrum is that well, maybe not a challenge, but an opportunity, right? I have seen in many companies that the product owner role, even the product manager in some places, is very focused on the before the delivery, right? The discovery part and the refinement of the requirements, etc. But then once we put it in the Scrum team and deliver it, no one is taking care of looking, measuring what happened to these capacities, capabilities, or what was the ROI, or I mean, many product owners and product managers are not doing the second part of the job, I would say, right? What has your work contributed, or what do you suggest for making sure that this part is also done?
Yeah, no, that's a very important question. So the two things that I like to suggest. The first one is a collaborative approach, where, similar to what some of my colleagues suggest, you have the person in charge of the product, and then the key stakeholders and selected development team members who work together, and who work together and continue to work together, ideally throughout the life cycle of a product, or at least large parts of the product life cycle, and who create the initial strategy and the initial product roadmap, and then continue to work on the product and continue to review the strategic decisions. And that's then the second recommendation, to essentially establish what I would like to call a continuous strategizing process, or continuous strategizing approach, where regularly, at least every 3 months, as a rule of thumb, that group of people come together and they look at the product strategy, they assess the product strategy and the product roadmap. And so they look at the performance of the product, and by product performance, I mean how much value the product has created, if the product has been able to make progress in terms of meeting the business goals and the user customer goals stated in the strategy, and certainly progress in terms of making progress towards the outcomes and goals stated in the product roadmap. And the way you do this is by using the right metrics, or the right key performance indicators, and looking at the data. You look at what's changed in terms of the competitive landscape. Are there any new competitors? Have any existing competitors launched new products or new features? What's happening there? Any new changes in terms of technologies, any new technology trends or regulatory trends, or consumer-related trends that are relevant for the product, or any changes with regards to the company? Has the business strategy changed, or the portfolio strategy changed? That typically means that a product strategy and product roadmap have to be adjusted as well. So really, really regularly inspect and adapt the strategic decisions, and make sure that they're still valid. I'm not such a big fan, I have to say, of measuring the value created by individual features or capabilities. I mean, it does depend to a certain extent how fine-grained, how small a feature and a capability is. And it also depends to a certain extent where a product is in its life cycle. For young product, it's very difficult to do, if not impossible. I would argue for mature products, it may be possible, it may even be desirable in some cases. But generally speaking, I'd always work with a goal, like a product goal, a product outcome for a time frame somewhere around, say, 6 weeks to 3 months, in some cases maybe even 4 to 6 months. That's what you're aiming for, and that's what you're shooting for. And that might be to acquire more users. It might be to increase engagement. It might be to, I think I mentioned that earlier, reduce technical debts, in order to future-proof the product, in order to be able to add new features more quickly and easily in the future. So that's what I would measure progress against. But yeah, you have to do that on a regular basis, because otherwise you're just executing a strategy, and you're just implementing a product roadmap that, if you're unlucky, are wrong. So you're doing a perfect job at executing the wrong strategy. That's not a recipe for success.
Yeah, it makes sense. So rather than checking some KPIs of each functionality, if you have a clear business goal, right, business outcome expected, then you will know that the things that you created worked or didn't work, you didn't achieve it, or you achieved it.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. And I mean, that's sort of the connection to the OKRs. And that's one of the things I do like about OKRs. So with objectives and key results, at least the way I understand them is that the objective, the goal, comes first. And then you think about, okay, how can we determine if that goal has been achieved? And that's how you define or set the right key results. And so I suggest we do something similar when it comes to KPIs. and product related metrics, that we first identify the goals, we first set the goals, and then we say, okay, how can we measure that we're making progress towards those goals? Which also means there is no standard set of KPIs that is always applicable. It very much depends on the type of product. Is it a consumer facing product? Is it a B2C product? Is it a B2B product? Does it generate revenue directly? Does it generate revenue indirectly? Is it an internal supporting product? Depending on the type of product that you offer, your KPIs will vary, at least to a certain extent. It's very important then to look at the goals, set the right goals for your product, and then identify those metrics, those KPIs that help you measure progress towards those goals, and then do it. And at least every 2 to 3 months, look at the progress together, look at the data together, and see if you're still on the right track, or if you should adjust, if you should adapt the strategy and the roadmap. I mean, the whole point of any form of planning is to be proactive and reduce the risk that we experience some form of emergency or crises, that suddenly we're sort of caught by surprise, and we find ourselves with our backs against the wall, and we're struggling, we're being leapfrogged by a competitor, and it's like, oh my god, nobody saw this coming. Oh dear, what are we going to do now? You want to avoid that, and in order to avoid that, you need to regularly again look at how much value your product is creating, and in order to do that, you need those goals.
Got it. Thank you, Roman. Could you now share with the audience what you consider one of your biggest achievements in your career, and also if you can share one of your biggest fails and what lesson did you learn? So 2 quick stories.
Biggest achievement. I think other people are probably in a better position to judge that rather than me. I mean, my ambition has been to help progress product management. So when I first encountered product management, so the story about me kind of falling into product management that I told at the beginning of our conversation, that dates back to 2001. And the product management that I experienced was really very old school. Very little collaboration, very little agility, if not no agility, lots of rigidity, but no agility. And so I hope that I've helped to a certain extent modernize product management, and my ambition has been to offer techniques and tools to do that. To help people make the right product decisions in a more collaborative and in a more agile, dynamic environment. So yes, and then failure, or that there are lots of failures. So one failure story is I don't know, several come to mind, but one failure story would be I tried a number of years ago to create a software tool suite out of the little tools and frameworks that I created, because I thought, it'd be really neat, be really nice if software versions were available. And in fact, when I started offering the product vision board and then the Go product roadmap in my persona template as PDFs, people contacted me and said like, hey, PDFs, I mean, come on, where's the app? Where's the software tool? And I thought like, well, print it out. People are like, what? Print it out? You're still living in the Stone Age. So I thought like, well, that was kind of maybe there's a demand, and it'd be neat. It'd be open up a new revenue stream for my business. Yeah, that sounds great. And I've got my own product tool suite. Yeah, nice. And then I started doing some customer interviews and doing some customer observation, and I started talking to suppliers, IT companies or agencies that would be able to create the appropriate software. And then got really excited, and then finally discovered, after I did a little bit more validation, that I was reasonably good at selling services to bigger companies, but I had zero experience in selling software products, tools to bigger companies. But bigger companies would have been my primary target group. And so I realized that I would have to either build up the necessary knowledge and skills, and I couldn't really see how I would be able to do that quick enough, or I'd have to hire someone. And that was just too big an investment for me. So there was it was basically just, I don't know, that just basically caused me to fail, or caused the idea to fail. I should say, and to abandon the idea. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it was probably the right thing to do. Even though sometimes I still think, oh, that software tool. I've had a similar thing with online learning. I've tried several times to create an online learning. Or online learning, how do you say online trainings? It's not online trainings, it's e-learning trainings. I've tried several times and it never quite worked out. And so, yeah, I've just kind of, at least for the time being, said like, okay, I'm not going to do it.
That's good. Thank you for sharing. So you mentioned the validation part, right? For me, another challenge that I had when I was a product manager was when is enough, or how to deal with the ego of presenting something that is not finished, is not perfect, it sucks, but you need to validate it, right? How can you deal with that, or what advice do you have for that?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, I think there's several factors at play here. One is the self-view that we have and the desire to succeed. And, I mean, at least I think in Western societies, we are conditioned from an early age to do the right thing, not to make a mistake and succeed. I mean, it really starts in school. So you get praised if you get it right. And so that's very ingrained in us. We want to get it right. We want to be good girls and boys or whatever. We want to receive praise. We crave that to a certain extent. We don't want to be seen to cock things up and then in front of colleagues. Oh my God, how would I look? What would that do to my career? And then I've certainly worked for and with companies that were very delivery or execution focused. Really expected flawless execution. And then you have an environment that isn't conducive to making failure and experiencing failure. And I have to say, depending on what product we're dealing with and where that product is in its life cycle, failure may not be desirable. So if you manage a cash cow, a product that is really important in order to be able to pay the bills that a company has, then you probably don't want to make too many mistakes and don't want to experience failure too often. That would jeopardize the cash flow. Possible. So it's the environment, it's our self-view, the expectations we have of ourselves, and it's the environment that we're in. I do think it's important to recognize that when we try something new, when we want to bring something new to life, if you want to innovate, if you want to build a new product or a new feature, or if you want to use a new technology, then there is a risk that we fail. That's the way we learn as human beings. I think there's this famous Albert Einstein quote where apparently he once said, the person who's never made a mistake has never tried anything new. I do think that's true. So if we kind of stay within our comfort zone, we can deepen our existing knowledge and we can hone our existing skills, but it'll be very hard to acquire new knowledge. It will be very hard to acquire new skills. So it's realizing that as an individual, and then if you have the opportunity to influence change in your organization, or if you are a leader, if you have a management position, then recognizing that and encouraging people, when innovation is necessary and desirable, to actually go and experiment and go and fail. It is truly part and parcel of the innovation process, but not always necessarily pleasant to experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. Every time that we go snow skiing with my friends, well, I have done it like 2 or 3 times. They most of them do not fall at all, right? And I'm falling like 20 times per day. Yeah, but I'm trying to jump. I'm trying to go between the trees. I'm trying stupid stuff, right? So, and they are just skiing like girls. So, well, sorry, girls are great at skiing. I don't want to offend any girl, right? Skier, but yeah, you have to try, you have to innovate, and you have to fall, right? That's how life goes. So that's okay, I guess. Roman, another challenge that I have had when I was doing product management was when there was tension between the short-term delivery, advantages or goals versus the long-term strategy. I'm talking about building a feature that will solve the immediate, issues that we have, and then, but if you do it, then you will need to redo it because whatever release will not work in the long term, right? How do you manage this tension?
So one way to approach this question is to say, if you practice, if you've got your strategizing process set up in the right way, that shouldn't happen. Because you should be proactive, and you should see the need to change early enough so you can adapt, and you don't have to kind of make compromise. But life's not perfect, and we don't always get things right. We just talked about that. So if an important customer comes to you and says, we'll only buy the next product version if you add this feature, and it doesn't really fit with the goal that you've set, it doesn't really fit with your current direction that you've chosen, I think it's a trade-off decision, really. It's to say, like, okay, are we willing to then ultimately alter and change our approach, our strategy, in order to make that sale, or do we stick in a way to our plan? Do we stick to our guns and say, like, no, we believe that we've made the right decision, and we'll generate enough revenue by offering the product the way we've envisioned? To a certain extent, that's also true. That's also dependent on the business model, the underlying business model. So if you offer a commercial product, a product that addresses the needs of several customers, or maybe a diverse group of customers, I think it can be unwise to listen too much to the requests of individual single customers, because you don't want to make the mistake that your product gets kind of pulled too much into a specific direction. And you really need to take informed risks. You really need to understand the market, and based on your market understanding, then make the right product decisions and be confident. And that's where research, that's where discovery, that's where validation, strategy validation come in. And that's why they're so important. However, if your business model is more like an agency model, where you develop bespoke software products for individual customers, and the customer says to you, actually, we've changed our mind, we do want this feature now. And it's a little bit like, okay, if the customer pays, customer is king. There you go, let's do it. But then often I find in the latter case, you don't really have a strong product management. You tend to have strong sales and a strong technology group. And in a way, that's all you need. Product management and marketing are often underdeveloped.
Got it. Thank you. I have a couple more. Do you still have some time?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, that's great. So another big challenge for many companies, at least in Latin America that I know of, they have Scrum. They are trying to do their best doing, good product management practices, but there's no creativity or innovation in the teams. What practice or what ideas or advice do you have for these companies to innovate, right?
Yeah, it's another great question. So innovation doesn't just happen out of the blue. I think innovation does require time. So if you don't, to put it differently, if you don't give people time, innovation is just not going to take place. So if people, are fully loaded, if people work 100% on the current sprint goal, that's all they do, then, when should they have the time and the energy in order to experiment with new technologies and think about how they could possibly help build the product faster or cheaper? Or, the same thing is true for the person in charge of the product manager or product owner. If the individual is 100% just busy kind of keeping track of what's going on, measuring data value, using KPIs, and working with development teams and engaging with the stakeholders, doesn't have any time to do any form of research and discovery, again, where should innovation come from? So I think is recognizing that you need to give people time. There are various ways you can do this. The hackathons or hack days, that companies famously use, like, or not famously use, that some companies use, like the Facebook like button, I believe, was famously created as part of a hackathon.
Nice.
There's the gold cards that you can use, that I've seen extreme programming teams employ back in the day, where you essentially give the development team or development team members a budget in order to innovate and experiment and try things out. And that's a little bit similar to the innovation budget or the pet projects that 3M used to use. And in Google, I think some parts of Google still use them. So yeah, I think that's really needed. You need to give people a little bit of time, a little bit of space, so that they can step away from the busy, hectic day-to-day work and be creative. To a certain extent, just play around, muck about, and see what happens.
Got it. Thank you for sharing. Another challenge. I'm the product owner, and then I get stakeholders shouting for some features. Then I get customers shouting for other features. My colleagues are shouting for another. How can you prioritize? Is the data-driven decisions key in here, or what would be your advice on this?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. So for me, part of addressing the issue is having a validated product strategy and having an outcome-based product roadmap in place. So I think if you haven't thought about the product strategy, if you haven't made strategic product decisions, if they haven't been captured, then prioritization on a tactical level, prioritizing a product backlog or saying yes or no to features is virtually impossible in my experience. It's like, what's the basis for doing that? So I really think you need that in place. And the second thing then is to being able to secure the buy-in and support from the right people, so particularly key stakeholders, and making sure that they're on the same page as you. And a great way to achieve this is to create a product strategy and create a product roadmap, and also then review and update those documents together with the individuals, together with the key stakeholders and development team members. And that allows you, first of all, to leverage their ideas and perspective and address any concerns they may have. It ensures that the decisions that you capture are clear, that everybody has a shared understanding. And most importantly, in our context, if you invite people to make a decision, help you make a decision, if you collaborate on a decision, people are more likely to support the decision, even if their ideas might not be taken into account, assuming that you attentively listen to people with an open mind, and and really hear them out. So I think that's really important to have those documents, have a strategy and have a roadmap, and to collaborate on them together with key stakeholders and development team members. And then a final aspect might be related to the empowerment of the person in charge of the product. As I mentioned earlier, for me, the person in charge of the product has to have the authority to make a decision if no agreement can be reached. So, you may want to use decision rules such as consent, for instance, in order to secure agreement to any roadmap changes. And consent means nobody has any meaningful objections. Everybody's okay with it. Everybody can live with the newly created or changed product roadmap. But if that consent can't be achieved, and you've kind of tried, and maybe you've worked hard on this, and maybe you've even tried more than once to achieve it, then in my mind, the person in charge of the product should be empowered, should have the authority to make a decision in order to allow things to move forward, to progress the product. And then I would expect that the key stakeholders and the development team members support the individual, and support the decision.
Got it. Thank you, Roman. Okay, so I have just one or two more. Did I miss any question or any topic that you would like to share with the audience? Any advice, any message?
No, it's all good for me. No, it's all good stuff.
Okay, that's great. So last, could you share with the audience any projects you are working on? And we will put over there your social network, social media, accounts, so they can reach to you. You share that?
Yeah. So one of the areas of work, or one of the areas I've tried to focus on this year, is to create more videos for my YouTube channel. So this is me shamelessly plugging my YouTube channel. And so I've tried to create at least one video per month. And
I can give you this month's video. This one, you can put it on your channel if you want.
Yeah, I can certainly link to it. That's right. Yeah, but having sort of my idea has been sort of to create a collection of mini product management tutorials for those people who like watching videos, like to learn more, but for whatever reason aren't able to attend one of my training courses. So offer a little bit of helpful information through that channel. So that's been one element. And then another element of my work that's been ongoing is to do some work in the leadership space. So around leadership practices for product people. So I've recently created a feedback framework, particularly for product people. And a number of established feedback frameworks out there, but they are largely for people who have positional power. So who are the boss, who have the authority to tell people what to do, or can command. Maybe that's another way. Whereas most product people don't have that. And then you're in a different position when you offer feedback, and it can be much more challenging. So I've created a little feedback framework for that. And so that's an area of ongoing work for me. Trying to offer practices in that space.
Awesome. Thank you, Roman. Last question: if you had to come back or go back in a time machine to your younger self, what tip or what advice would you give to you?
What advice would I give to myself? Oh, lots of advice.
Me too.
So, in terms of product management, I'd tell myself that product management is a fascinating, in my mind, it still is a fascinating profession. It's really interesting, but it's also very diverse. As I've mentioned earlier, it's changed. It's been changing quite a bit, and it does take time to acquire the relevant knowledge and acquire the relevant skills. So, not being overly ambitious and not being impatient, but, being aware that, you kind of never stop learning when it comes to product management. And I still learn new things. I think it's a good thing. But, it takes time to be competent, to become a competent product person. And I think, I tell myself to take that time. And that's also the advice I'd give to other people, not to put yourself under too much pressure or expect too much from you. And, particularly in recent months, I've received a few messages from people saying, hey, I've just started out in product management, and I want to now write about product management. I want to now write a product management newsletter. How should I do this? Which is like, you should work as a product manager for a few years before you think about writing a newsletter. So you don't become as I said, a competent product person overnight. It does take months. It takes probably more years rather than just hours or days. It's the nature of the work that we do. So give yourself that time.
That's great, and I have to agree with you. These product management roles are some of the best roles that I have experienced in my life. Like the pleasure of building something with a team and then putting it in the hands of someone else and making her or his life easier. It has a lot of you experiment a lot of good things, and it's great. I really like, at some point in my career, I would really love to jump back to the product management side. I have been doing agile coaching, which is also great, but the product management has some special magic, right? I will say it like that. Roman, thanks a lot for joining, for sharing with my audience this time. And let's I would love to have some second part at some point, like you mentioned before the camera was turned recording, maybe with a specific topic, because there's so much to cover with the product management role and the skill, right? So my channel is open for you. Thank you for sharing and for your time, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, well, thank you again very much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. Happy to come back, and thanks again.
Thank you. Subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss it. Thank you, Roman. Bye.
Bye.